My name is Shonda. I'm autistic.
Well. Now, I never thought this day would come, but I guess the day of reckoning has finally arrived. I don't like VTubers anymore. And trust me, if you knew me a few years ago, hearing those words come out of my mouth would have sounded insane. For those who are stumbling onto my channel for the first time, my name is Tickle. I'm a recovering VTuber fan. And today I want to tell you the story how I slowly fell into and eventually crawled out of the bottomless pit that some people know as VTubing. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a time in my life where I was utterly consumed by VTubers, and I mean consumed. To the point where I'm ashamed to say this, but I was actually a moderator for one. Yeah, I know. Throw me in jail and toss away the key. Now, you're probably wondering, how in God's name was I able to escape? And the answer might surprise you, because in the end, it wasn't some outside force that made me pull away from VTubing. It was actually VTubers and the communities around them. The very thing that once brought me entertainment and enjoyment slowly became the reason I left. Now, to understand where my addiction to these 2D individuals came from, you have to go back to the very beginning, to the moment I first came into contact with VTubers, which is actually kind of funny because the very first video I ever uploaded to this channel was about that exact topic. Now, before you click off and watch that video, let me save you the trouble. It was my first ever video. The audio is atrocious. You can barely hear me, and the editing is very questionable. Overall, just not a very good video. So let me tell the story again, hopefully with a slightly better production quality. I first became aware of VTubers around mid-2020, and well, I think we all know what was happening around then. COVID. Because of the pandemic, a lot of us were stuck indoors with way too much free time and an unhealthy amount of internet access. We were all basically becoming chronically online. During one of my many doom scrolling sessions, I started to see VTubers pop up all over my feed. And to be completely honest, I didn't get it at all. I thought they were weird, I thought they were cringy, and genuinely I couldn't understand why people were watching anime avatars play video games. But sometime around late 2020 or early 2021, I came across a VTuber known as Bao the Whale. And for some reason I still can't fully explain, I kept watching her videos. One TikTok became another, and I started watching YouTube clips, then full videos, then streams, then I started watching her friends, and before I knew it, my entire YouTube recommendation page had transformed into nothing but VTubers. What once seemed weird and cringy became normal and honestly hilarious. Without even realizing it, I had fallen straight down the VTuber rabbit hole. And I didn't just become a casual viewer, I became obsessed with learning every facet of the VTuber scene. I would be at my demolition job with earbuds in, listening to streams, clips, and videos all day long. There were times I'd start laughing to myself at work, and my coworkers would just look at me like I had completely lost my mind. I listened to their music. There were songs that I put on repeat for hours. I just truly enjoyed VTubers. And if I had to explain why I fell so deep into this community, I think it just came down to one thing: freedom. These creators weren't limited by their real identities or appearances. They can be weird, they can be loud, they can be unfiltered. And in an internet that often felt so manufactured and fake, that was incredibly refreshing to see. At least that's how I felt back then. Now, my obsession had gotten so bad that I think VTubers were pretty much all I consumed on a daily basis. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, streams, clips, music, community posts, drama videos. It's something happened in the community. I probably knew about it. I spent hours in Discord servers talking to other fans just like myself. Slowly but surely, my life began to revolve around VTubers, and things only got worse when I quit my construction job to go back to school. Because with so much free time on my hands, I sank even deeper into the rabbit hole. And it was around this point that I finally reached rock bottom. I became a Twitch moderator for a VTuber. Now, out of respect for the VTuber and their community, I'm not going to mention who they are, but I'm sure you're wondering, Tickle, how in God's name did you manage to become a VTuber mod? Honestly, it's not even that crazy of a story. One day I was watching a YouTube video featuring a very popular VTuber collaborating with another VTuber I had never heard of before. But while watching, I immediately clicked with their sense of humor. They were funny, they were entertaining, and before I knew it, I had opened up Twitch and searched for their channel. Luckily for me, they were live. I followed and started chatting, kept coming back to streams, and over time I became a regular and a familiar face. Then someone both the community and the streamer recognized. What started as me as simply watching a streamer slowly turned it into me becoming part of the community itself. This went on for some time, until one day the VTuber announced they were doing a subathon. And because subathons can be pretty hectic, they needed more moderators. By this point, I was a already well-known chatter in the community. People knew me, the streamer knew me, and to my surprise, they asked me if I would be interested in helping moderate the event. Naturally, I said yes. At the time, it honestly felt like an honor. I had gone from simply watching VTubers to becoming part of the act behind the curtain, helping maintain order while the show went on. And while I didn't realize it at the time, this would mark the beginning of the end. Now, my time as a mod wasn't exactly the most eventful thing in the world. The streamer was really easygoing, and because I usually moderated late night streams, chat was pretty quiet. Most nights it was just a handful of loyal viewers hanging around. So I did my time. The subathon came and went, and as the year went by, I had to focus more and more on school. Eventually, I stepped away from modding, but every now and then, I'd still pop into streams, join Discord voice chats, and hang out with the community from time to time. It was during one of these voice calls that something happened, which, looking back, really stuck with me. The streamer was doing a challenge where they had to draw the map of the United States entirely from memory, and oh my god, they were butchering it. completely. Me and a bunch of the other viewers were dying laughing watching this poor attempt at geography unfold in real time. But then, out of nowhere, someone in the call, someone I had spoken to many times before and genuinely enjoyed talking with, got visibly upset. They started talking about how disappointing it was that the streamer didn't know the states, how they were uneducated and how people should know these things. Another viewer tried to lighten the mood and basically said, come on, not that serious. Most of us probably couldn't do much better. Honestly, I thought the same thing. But instead of letting it go, the conversation kept escalating. They started talking about ignorance, about being informed, about how people have the responsibility to educate themselves. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, the conversation shifted towards the war in Palestine. The call just stopped. Everyone went quiet. It felt like all the energy had been sucked out of the room. The same call that had just been full of laughter just moments earlier suddenly felt tense and uncomfortable. Eventually, the conversation ended and I left the call as fast as I could. And for the first time, I remember asking myself, are these really the social circles I want to be part of? Now, to be clear, this isn't me saying everyone in VTuber communities is like this. Far from it. I met some genuinely kind people through VTubing. But over time, I realized that many of the communities I found myself viewed the world very differently from me. And as someone who's more conservative, I often felt like I had to keep a part of myself hidden. Not because anyone explicitly told me to, but because I didn't want to start arguments. I didn't want to make people uncomfortable, so I kept my head down, stayed under the radar. And for a while, I started feeling like I was wearing a mask. Because if people only liked the version of me that I chose to show them, did they actually like me at all? Or did they just like the character I was playing? So there I was, questioning whether I even belonged in these communities anymore. And because of that, I decided to take a little break from VTubing. At least that's what I told myself. A little break, a few days, maybe a week. But that slowly turned into something much bigger. My YouTube homepage, once completely dominated by VTubers, was wiped clean. Stream notifications that I would have instantly clicked on are now being swiped away without a second thought. The urge just wasn't there anymore. And before I knew it, I had quit cold turkey. For a while, I simply moved on with my life. Then 2025 happened. And if you've been around the VTuber scene, you already know where this is going. Drama. Lots of drama. Graduations, agency controversies, friendships falling apart, entire communities arguing with one another. I felt like every time one fire was put out, another one immediately started. And while I don't think all of that is solely responsible for why I left, it did reinforce the feeling I had already been developing for quite some time. Something had changed. The freedom and the authenticity that originally drew me into VTubing didn't feel the same anymore. And strangely enough, the person who best represents that feeling for me is Bao, which is kind of funny when you think about it because Bao was the one person who introduced me to VTubing in the first place. In a weird way, the story comes full circle. Back in 2020, I couldn't stop watching her content. It was funny, she was entertaining, she felt genuine, and more importantly, she felt different. One of the things that attracted me to Bao and a lot of her friends was that they seemed authentic. They weren't afraid to speak their minds. They weren't trying to maintain some squeaky clean corporate image. They felt like real people. At least that's how I saw it. But over time, the same quality slowly started becoming the thing that pushed me away. The first major example was during the Cinder controversy. For those who don't know, the situation involved allegations that Cinder and her management had attempted to discourage collaborations between creators, and in some cases, damage relationships behind the scenes for business reasons. One of the people caught in the middle of all of this was Bao, and understandably, Bao was hurt. Someone she considered a close friend had apparently betrayed her, and I don't fault her for feeling upset. But what stuck with me wasn't the fact that she was angry. It was how situations like these started getting handled. Over and over again, I noticed a pattern. Whenever drama happened, conversations stopped being about accountability and started becoming about picking sides. If you agreed with someone, you were part of the group. If you disagreed, you became the enemy. And that feeling only got stronger as time went on. A good example was the tweet Bao made about warning smaller creators to be careful around large creators in the industry. Now, honestly, I don't even disagree with the message itself. There absolutely are situations where bigger creators can abuse their position. The problem I had was how vague the message was. Because if you're aware of someone causing harm and you have enough information to warn people about it, why be cryptic? Why turn it into a guessing game? And when people started pushing back on the wording of the tweet, instead of clarifying her position, the response felt hostile. People were insulted. People were mocked. And what could have been a conversation immediately became a fight. That's the part that started bothering me. Not just with Bao, but with VTubing as a whole. I felt more and more creators were treating criticism as an attack, and more communities were treating disagreement as betrayal. Then later, when the allegations involving Sykkuno became public, we learned that Bao had been aware of concerns long before the information became public. She had helped connect people involved behind the scenes, and that's where I personally became frustrated. Because if the situation was serious enough to privately warn people about, why wasn't it serious enough to publicly announce sooner? Again, this isn't me saying Bao is a bad person. It's not even really about Bao. She's just the example example that made me realize something. The same unfiltered, strong-willed personality traits that originally made VTubers feel authentic to me were now creating situations where criticism was dismissed, accountability became non-existent, and the communities became increasingly hostile towards anyone asking any sort of question. And that's when it finally clicked for me. I wasn't enjoying the community anymore. I was exhausted by it. Not because of one creator, not because of one controversy, not because of one bad experience. It was an accumulation of all of it. The drama, the tribalism, the constant feeling that every disagreement had to become a battle. The expectation that you either fully agreed with someone or you were somehow against them. And after a while, I just couldn't do it anymore. The weirdest part is that I don't regret it at all. I met interesting people. I discovered creators I genuinely enjoyed. I made memories I'll probably remember for years. But sometimes a hobby only belongs in a certain chapter of your life. And maybe VTubing was just one of mine. And that's ultimately why I left. Not because I suddenly hated VTubers, not because every community was bad, and not because every creator was some terrible person. The truth is a lot simpler than that. I changed. The community changed, and somewhere along the way, the things that originally pulled me into VTubing stopped being enough to keep me around. Some of my favorite memories came from this community, and generally funny moments. Some genuinely talented creators. And a lot of people I'll probably never forget. But eventually, it stopped feeling like a hobby. It stopped feeling like entertainment. It started feeling exhausting. The pressure to always be on the right side of an argument. The feeling that you couldn't disagree without becoming the villain. After a while, I realized it just wasn't fun anymore. And once a hobby stops being fun, what's the point? Maybe some of you watching this have a completely different experience. Maybe you still love VTubing as much as I did back in 2020. And honestly, that's great. I'm not here to tell you should or you shouldn't enjoy it. This is just a story of how I fell into the VTuber rabbit hole and how I eventually climbed back out. But I'm curious, do any of you feel the same way? Or am I just a recovering VTuber fan yelling into the void? Let me know down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!